G'day everyone, D-Mac from NBA Fantasy Bible here. Welcome to our inaugural show, Between Two Hoops, NBA Fantasy Basketball Show. Let's get into it. All right, I would like to introduce a special guest as well. So those of you are probably familiar with some of my work on Twitter, but I'd love to introduce you to a new talent tonight. Let's get Kayla Fonte onto our show. Let's get her in. Kayla, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, doing well. Thank you very much. Now, give us a bit of an intro into you. From Canada, give us a bit of a background into your love of fantasy basketball and how we actually came about into collaborating.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'm actually a fourth year journalism student at Toronto Metropolitan University, which is formerly called Ryerson. My love of fantasy probably goes back to actually last year. So, I'm relatively new to it, but I still have a lot of experience with it. I started doing some friends leagues, and then, yeah, from there, it just kind of took off. And then I'm doing some leagues this year too. And that's pretty much how I got into it.
Nice, nice. Now, I'm under the impression that you love your points leagues, whereas I'm more of a category leagues, a bit of an expert there. But yeah, tell us about why you love points leagues, or have you not delved into category leagues as of yet?
So far, I've only done one categories league. I'm doing 2 points leagues this year, and I did two last year. It's just I find with categories leagues, it's more skill involved. It's a little bit more time consuming, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love that too. It's just I just happen to get stuck in points leagues because that's what people prefer in my groups. But I will do honestly anything fantasy.
Absolutely. And it's all about learning. And it'll be great for us to compare and share notes and compare and contrast categories versus points and see if some of our thinkings and our mindset are quite shared as well. So this will actually be super interesting. A little bit more about yourself. So journalism, you also write for a pretty well-esteemed company as well. Give us a bit of detail on that.
Yeah, so I also work for Last Word on Sports. Basically, we cover all sports there. I work as a writer and editor in the basketball department, and I've been there since January now.
Awesome. Nice work. All right. Well, I cannot wait. Shall we just get into it?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Let's get this going. Okay. Let's go, guys. So what we're going to do, this is probably going to be a weekly show, Kayla, I'm thinking.
Mhm.
So you guys are going to see a lot of us in the coming months as well. So it's super exciting. We've just gone through preseason as well. So what we'd like to do is just go through our thoughts heading into the regular season, which is in fact 2 days from now. I cannot wait. I'm beside myself. But let's get into it. So as I said, the name of our show is Between Two Hoops, NBA Fantasy Basketball Show. I'm D-Mac, also known as NBA Fantasy Bible, but let's go. I love it. All right. First things first, notable trades in the off-season. So I know we've just gone through preseason, but let's just recap on some of our notable trades in the off-season. Obviously, the biggest one, Dame Lillard, going from Portland, taking us through to the Bucks as well. What do you think about that one, Kayla?
So when I found out about this trade, I almost like fell over. And I was actually walking through downtown. I wanted to like scream it at the top of my lungs just to everyone.
Yeah,
Honestly, it
absolutely.
was right. It was just crazy. I mean, I think it's a
Oh, it's
good move for
crazy.
the Bucks. I think it'll open up a lot of opportunities for Giannis. Hopefully, some more playmaking. I know last year that Lillard did average over 30 points a game, so it'll be interesting to see if he can replicate that this year with all that star power. What do you
Yeah,
think?
absolutely. Look, I don't think he'll be able to replicate it to that degree
Mhm.
because he was the main man. He was the main man back at Portland, and now he's going to share the accolades with Giannis, but it's going to be such a fearsome team as well. So they've still got Middleton, they've still got Brolo as well. Yes, they gave up a bit of defense with Drew, but this offensive firepower is just going to be almost unstoppable. They're going to call that the Freak Show, which is or Freak Time, I should say. It's really exciting. So I can't wait to see how they go. They're actually my favorites for taking out the championship, but we'll see what happens, what transpires from that point. All right, moving forward. Speaking of Drew, yes, of course, he's gone from the Bucks. He's moved across to the Celtics. What are your thoughts, Kayla?
I think this is a really good move. Honestly, right now I have it as the Celtics with one of the best starting lineups in the NBA. I think he'll have a lot of good playmaking opportunities with Tatum, Porzingis, Horford if he's in that starting lineup, even Jalen Brown as well.
Absolutely. And I know there was a lot of preseason hype around Derek White.
Mhm.
It's probably been removed a little bit since Drew's arrival, but I still think there's a lot of value in having Derek White on fantasy teams as well. But we'll see what that starting lineup is. I've got a feeling that Al Horford will come off the bench and be Porzingis' backup, but time will tell. Getting into the next one. These guys weren't a direct swap, but essentially they were. So DeAndre Ayton going from the Suns, going to the Blazers, and likewise Yusuf Nurkic going the other way. Give us your thoughts on that one, Kayla.
Yeah, I think it's good that Aiden finally got out of Phoenix because I know he was unhappy there. He's been the subject of trade rumors for years now. With Portland, he'll finally have that opportunity just to kind of expand his role a little bit, do his own thing. With Nurkic, I think it's a good opportunity for him as well. It's just that injury history that makes you really hesitant when drafting him. But when he's on the court, he provides pretty good, decent fantasy value.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a little bit of a downgrade for the Suns at that
Mhm.
center position, but I think it's going to be actually a huge year. I predict a massive year for DeAndre Ayton. Yeah, I've actually got him in one of my teams, so
Me
I can't
too.
wait to see. Yeah, it's going to be really exciting. I think he's going to be one of the guys that's going to jump up those category ranks and probably in the points leagues as well.
Mhm.
Similarly, Robert Williams, Time Lord, he's gone from the Celtics, also moved across to the Trailblazers. So he will likely be the backup to Ayton. There is talk that they could possibly play alongside of each other with Ayton establishing a bit more of a range as well. But I still think that predominantly Time Lord will play as backup to Ayton.
Yeah, I
What do
have
you
to
think?
agree with you there. I know Aiden's dealt with a couple of injuries here and there, but so has Time Lord. So that'll be a big factor in their playing time and if they do start alongside each other.
Yeah, and I know that everyone knows that Time Lord is a per-minute monster, so he doesn't
Mhm.
need all that much time to actually be of fantasy relevance. Even in points leagues, I still think he should be rostered in 12-team leagues, in points leagues, and definitely in category leagues. I think, yes, there are a lot more big men with the blocks later in the draft, and we'll talk about that later on in the show as well, but I still think he'll be of value late in drafts. Porzingis, we mentioned him. So he had a monster season last season with the Wizards. He's now moved to a stacked team at the Celtics. What do you see his value doing in terms of him being probably the number three option on offense alongside Jalen Brown and, of course, Jason Tatum?
See, I was actually a little concerned about that, which is why I didn't draft him this year, and he kind of fell in a lot of my drafts that I did. I did take him last year with the Wizards, and he was one of my top players, but now I'm worried about his offensive contributions because I know even Tatum, Brown, they're fairly healthy, so they're likely to see a lot of time on the court, which could take away a lot of his usage.
Absolutely. He has looked really solid in preseason. So,
Mhm.
yes, he's going to sleep in some of the rankings for categories and for points alike, but I still think he's going to be extremely solid. So, those that did draft KP, I think he's injuries aside, I think he should have a really solid year. Moving on a little bit lower down the draft order, but John Collins, he was a previous fantasy stud, particularly when he was playing as the small ball center at the Hawks. He has struggled for the last couple of years since Clint Capella's arrival. He haven't been able to afford the usage and the time at center to be the fantasy stud that he formerly was. But hopefully, a bit of a renaissance moving across to the Utah Jazz.
I think this is a good opportunity for him to finally return to his fantasy glory. With the Hawks, he didn't have the chance to kind of evolve and develop his game. But now I think with the Jazz, with all their young core, he has that opportunity and he may surprise a lot of fantasy managers this year.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's a sneaky candidate to be one of the more improved fantasy performers. I know he was much maligned at the Hawks for the last couple of seasons, often part of trade rumors, which probably did influence how he played over time. But hopefully, he does get that renaissance at the Jazz. So we'll see how that works out. CP3, that was a big trade, going from the Suns to the Warriors. Give us your thoughts on that one.
This is a very hard one to say, just because even when I was doing my own position rankings for drafting, I didn't know how to separate the team. Like I figured that Curry would move to shooting guard, and then Chris Paul would move to point. But there's also rumors that he will start off the bench, which will have significant impacts on his fantasy value. And even then, his stats are declining every year, so he's still a bit of a risky pick. But still, it's just hard how that dynamic will work. Because I know in preseason, he did start a lot of games at point guard, which is going to see an uptick in his assists, right? And then even it's going to
Absolutely.
impact how Curry, Thompson, the rest of those guys play.
Absolutely. Keep in mind that Draymond Green was injured
Mhm.
through preseason, so that's going to influence Chris Paul's output once Draymond does return. They're probably going to take away assist opportunities from each other. I still think it'll work, but if Draymond does start and Chris Paul happens to find himself on the bench, it will probably take away a few minutes, which will impact his fantasy output as well. So I am seeing him going quite late in drafts, and in category leagues, he was going around the 80 to 90 range, and sometimes even later, which is quite crazy when you think about how good he's been in the past. But keep in mind, particularly with category leagues, there's such a premium on assists, so he is a sneaky great value in those later rounds as well. Bradley Beal. Okay, so he's gone from the Wizards, top 2 player at the Wizards alongside a KP. Now he is going on to the stacked offensive team, which is the Suns.
Yeah, they have a new big three now, which is going to be interesting to see how that affects everyone's usage.
Mm.
I think, well, he has been named the starting point guard, so he'll definitely see an increase in assists. And even Booker, too, should spend some time at that spot as well. His scoring may take a bit of a hit, but I think still it's going to be a very interesting team to watch, and even for fantasy.
I think so. I think he's probably the clear number 3 offensive threat on that
Mhm.
team, but any one of those 3, KD, Booker, and Bill, can go off on any single night as well. So he's still a threat. He's a great mid-round guy. A lot of people have targeted him around that 50 to 60 mark, which I think is awesome value in category leagues and probably likewise in points leagues. Okay, so they're the notable trades. Let's get into our preseason observations. It goes without saying, Victor Wembanyama. Wemby, what an absolute stud. I'm just so proud and happy to have him on my keeper league. It's very exciting. I think he's actually going to change how basketball is played, and particularly how fantasy managers see basketball as well. I think some of the footage, and I don't know if you saw much of him play, but I did watch, and it was just outstanding. Some of the footage that when he was playing against the Warriors, the Warriors crowd was just awestruck, and it was awesome to see.
Yeah, I didn't really watch a lot of preseason, but all over my Instagram feed is just Wemby highlights, and it's insane how he looks, like with his length and his frame and how he can block shots. Like, I unfortunately did not get to draft him in my leagues, which I'm very disappointed about. But it was crazy because he was going in like the second rounds in the drafts that I did.
Right. Some of the earlier drafts that I participated in, he was going in the 4th round.
Oh
Give
wow.
it, and I mentioned this on a different show that I do with Puppy Roy and Eric on a different channel. We were talking about how it would only take a few games in preseason for that value and for that ADP to rise, which it did. And I've actually seen a lot of examples of him being taken in the 1st round, which is pretty crazy to think. But you know what? He's transcending basketball at the moment, so maybe it's not that crazy. He does everything, but we'll talk about it a little bit later. But there is that threat with the Spurs probably going to struggle this season. Come the end of the season, he's going to be that shutdown candidate. I'm hoping that because of the new rules around All NBA and Rookie of the Year awards, that he does play 60 plus games. So hopefully that keeps him on the court, which is going to be great for everyone that have drafted him as well. All right, hot performances. So there's times that we read too much into preseason performances, and you can take a lot of observations from the preseason. Obviously, we spoke about Wemby, absolute stud, but going through the rest of this list, Jonathan Kuminga, the Warriors, he was probably the MVP of preseason. Do you think that form continues into the regular season?
I don't think it does. I think that if there's a lot of injuries on the Warriors and he has that opportunity to step up, we could potentially see it. But I don't think that we should take it too literally. Take it with a grain of salt. That this is also preseason, like you mentioned before. And I don't know. I don't think it's likely to continue, but it could.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's definitely worth rostering in 12-team leagues and above, and deeper, I should say. But I do have hesitation that he will, and have my doubts that he will continue on that preseason form. It was such a hot streak as well. But as I mentioned earlier, Draymond Green was out, so some of that usage does get taken away from Kuminga, and of course they're going to play more minutes into their real superstars as well. Desmond Bain, obviously Memphis. We heard overnight that Steven Adams is now injured, so that's a season-long injury. On top of that, with Ja Morant sitting the first third of the season suspended, Desmond Bain, I think he's going to have an awesome start to the year. He was awesome last year as well, and I think he's just going to take it one step further this year. What do you think his fantasy stocks are looking like?
I'm thinking the same thing. I took him with my third pick. So I'm
Mm.
very high on him this year. I had him last year too, and he was amazing, even with that injury that kept him out for a while. He has the opportunity and he'll see the usage, especially with Adams and Morant out. So I'm very, very high on him. And I think he's definitely worth considering to draft.
I agree. I think he has the sneaky playmaking ability as well. He's got a high basketball IQ. He's going to be playing alongside a Marcus Smart, Derrick Rose as well. So they're not guys that get high levels of assists. So I think on top of his scoring and his 3-point shooting and great efficiency, he's going to have those assists to his name as well. So we saw a little bit of that last season. I think he continues on this season, and he's just going to absolutely feast, particularly while Ja Morant's out of the team. Next one is one of my boys. I'm super excited to see how he goes in Washington. Jordan Poole, so former Warriors, much maligned Warriors star, Jordan Poole. What do you think about Poole Party?
Yeah, he's definitely been rising up the rankings. I unfortunately did not get to draft him this year, but I was also very high on him too. I think he'll be like one of the primary options with the Wizards. I know there's already been a little bit of conflict within the team. I know he's primary, like just a scorer. So I guess we'll see how that goes too. I can't see his assists going up too much.
No, but he's playing alongside a Tyus Jones.
Mhm.
And look, Tyus Jones will be that primary playmaker, but I think Paul's just going to take it upon himself to just really be that superstar. And yeah,
Yes.
as you alluded to, there was a little bit of conflict. Denny Avdia showing a little bit of disdain. But I don't know if you saw that footage, but
Yep.
Avdia wasn't even open for a shot. So I don't know why he's having a go at Paul, but he's going to have a superb season. Again, similar to Wemby, there is that small chance, a little bit of risk that as the Washington Wizards decline in terms of their performance and head towards the end of the season, they're not going to be contending for a playoff spot. So there is a chance that he'll be sitting more games come the end of the season. But up until that point, we don't worry about that. We just enjoy a lot of the ups and sometimes the lows. We actually saw that in the last preseason game. I think he shot 1 of 15. None of 6 from the 3-point line, 7 points on horrific shooting. But I guess that's the pool party experience. I think 2 nights before that, he shot 41 points. So you're going to get those ups and downs. I just think they're going to be more up than down. So he's going to be probably one of the candidates for most improved player of the year. Next one, Tyler Hero. Similar type of player.
Yep.
Kyle Lowry is probably going to be the starting point guard, but I still think that Tyler Hero ups his playmaking ability and playmaking opportunity. They didn't get Dame. Tyler Hero was probably the most likely to be traded in a potential Dame trade that never eventuated. So I think he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's got something to prove.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, and that's why I drafted him so high as well. The Heat also lost several players over the offseason, and they didn't really bring anyone back, right? Besides, I
Yeah,
think Josh Richardson it was, but still,
yeah,
Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, those are the guys who are going to be stepping up right now, which
yeah.
is
I
why I'm so
completely
high
agree.
on him.
Yeah, I think Hero is going to be tremendous value this season. I think he was still going in sort of the mid to late rounds in my category
Mhm.
leagues. I think he's probably going to provide top 50 value this season, but let's wait and see. He's previously been just mainly a primary scorer, or primarily a scorer, I should say. Let's see if he can add a few strings to his bow. Now, similar to Jordan Poole, I think this is probably a Jordan Poole light, but Anthony Simons, I think he's going to have an awesome season. Dame's now gone. I think he's going to be the number one usage guy on the Blazers. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you there too. I think honestly, everyone on the Blazers is going to have that breakout season now that there's a time, there's a usage. there's just so many opportunities there with Dame gone. It's a good time to experiment, see what works. But Simons 100% will have to carry a lot of Dame's burden.
Yeah, so he's going to take up most of the scoring burden. Playmaking, they've got Scoot Henderson, so number 2 draft pick. He looks awesome. So they'll probably share playmaking, but that scoring, he's just going to go off on certain nights. So I would not be surprised where he would have multiple 30-plus point games, probably some 40-plus games as well. So yeah, it's going to be an awesome experience. Now, finally, I don't know what you think of Scotty Barnes, but Raptors fans obviously love Scotty Barnes, high draft pick. He looked really good in preseason. Give us your thoughts.
Yes, I am also one of those Raptors fans, so I may be a little bit biased here, but I am also very high on Barnes this year. I think he's going to be good. I know he's going to have a lot more playmaking duties. He'll probably see a lot more time at the guard spot too. And even last year, he was getting high quality minutes. Is it going to be the same thing this year? He's going to be one of the primary options alongside Siakam. Trent Jr. is probably going to see increased usage, but Barnes, I think he's ready to have that leap that many expected him to have last season.
Yeah, you mentioned Gary Trent. Look, I probably see him coming off the bench. I think
Mhm.
Dennis Schroeder starts at the point, but I see a lot of point Barnes as well. So they'll probably interchange their playmaking. But in the half court, I think Barnes might actually struggle. And we saw Schroeder do really well for Germany at the World Cup. But I still think he's going to have a much improved season on last year. So
Yeah,
yeah, super
definitely his
exciting for your
shooting.
team.
That's the thing, is the
Yes,
shooting.
yeah, and that's something that's let him down in the past. Been his efficiency. So if he can add that to, particularly when we're talking category leagues, if he can
Mhm.
add that, that just takes his game to a further level. And you can apply that to points leagues as well. So obviously, increased efficiency means more points. So yeah, we can apply that both ways. Okay, so there's a bit of a list here. So we'll just look at a few rotations as a result of some preseason activity. So just very quickly, Atlanta, it looks as though the forward positions are going to be set in stone. So contrary to what I have up here, but it looks like Sadiq Bey and DeAndre Hunter, based on the last preseason game, will start at the forward positions, which is a bit of a hit to those that picked up Jalen Johnson, either drafted him late as a late round flyer or picked him up off the waiver wire. I still have hope for JJ that he does probably take over DeAndre Hunter's role at some stage, but at this stage, it's going to be Bey and Hunter. Moving on to Boston, we spoke very briefly, but is it going to be Derek White or is it going to be Al Horford that starts? I think Derek White will start alongside of Drew, and Al Horford comes off the bench to back up KP. What do you think?
I was actually thinking the opposite.
Right.
Derek White would be off the bench, but then again, it's that time to experiment, right? See what works. I know a lot of other basketball sites have White starting, so I may be in the wrong here, but because Al Horford is also getting up there, right? He's a little bit older now, but
Mm.
he's still definitely worth drafting. Very well-rounded center for sure.
Definitely well rounded. He's always been a bit of a fan favorite, late round guy. He will sit out back to backs.
Yeah.
I think last season they said that he wouldn't, but he definitely did. I'm pretty sure he sat out every back to back, which is fine. He's quite an old man now, but it may be matchup dependent whether or not White or Horford starts on any given night. But yeah, let's see how that plays out. But I still have high hopes of Derek White. Probably not as much as what we thought before Drew arrived, as I was saying earlier, but I still think he's a clear top 100 player. Now, Charlotte, yeah, absolute chaos. That organization is, I won't go into too many expletives, but Miles Bridges' situation, it's still unclear as to when he'll come back. We won't go into too many details, but in terms of fantasy, that gives a boost to Gordon Hayward and Brandon Miller as well. So depending on who you think may start, it may sway who has the greater fantasy value. Is it going to be Hayward? Is it going to be Miller? Does anyone else step up? PJ Washington will probably get a boost as well if Miles Bridges does not return, which many are predicting won't happen as well. How do you see this playing out?
It's really hard to say. Right now, I have Miller projected to start, but with Bridges, he was dropped in both of my leagues too. So I was actually considering picking him up just to stash, but
Hmm.
I don't think the situation is looking very good.
No, and if you have IL or IL plus and you have the ability to stash someone who is suspended, so that's not applicable to ESPN because they have recently changed that. But if in Yahoo leagues you have the ability to stash, there's no harm. You may as well do so, and we'll hopefully get some clarity. He was set to miss the first 10 games of the season. I don't know if that's extended out either by the NBA or by Charlotte themselves, or by the law, perhaps, as well. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, if you have an IL, there is no harm in stashing him for now. If you don't, I don't think he's worth a hold. Yeah, he was a couple of seasons back. He was a top 30, top 40 category league player. He was awesome, but things have changed. He's had a year removed from NBA basketball. Um, I don't think you can afford to stash him if you don't have that IL. Now, moving to Chicago, I think the starting point guard role has been taken. It will be Kobe White. Um, Earlier in the preseason, it looked like it could be one of Javon Carter, White, Tasumi, or Caruso, but I think White's got that position sewn up for now as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you there. When I was trying to write my rankings, I was trying to sort everyone by their positions, and Chicago was one of the hardest teams to do that for. But I think I put White as a point guard too. They'll all see minutes. It's not going to be that much just because there's a log jam at that spot right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think Kobe White's probably the best of them. Caruso obviously will get you those steals, which are very valuable in category leagues, and he can play 1 through 3, occasionally at the 4 as well. So he's very versatile as a defender, but I think Kobe White's just going to have more of an opportunity to show his wares on the offensive end. Detroit, more rotation observations. So it's looking like Jaden Ivey was going to be coming off the bench, and Osar Thompson in his rookie season would start. But it's looking like Bojan Bogdanovic, just overnight, we've got word that he won't be playing in the first game for Detroit. So Jaden Ivey does get a reprieve, so he'll probably start alongside of Asar and Cade Cunningham as well. But another rotation piece, backup center. So behind Jalen Duren, is it going to be James Wiseman or is it going to be Marvin Bagley? What do you think?
Hard to say. I want to say Wiseman though, based on my research, it seems that he's the favorite to be the backup, but I could see Bagley getting some opportunities just to showcase what he can do.
Yeah, and like Detroit's notorious at picking the wrong way, but we'll see. I think Bagley's been solid. Again, for category leagues, he's probably not someone that you would target in standard leagues, but for points leagues, he probably could give you some value in some deeper leagues as well. Now, Golden State, we spoke about CP3 and Looney off the bench, and Draymond is day to day, but I feel like he probably does start opening night. But let's wait and see. But we won't get into too much detail on that one. Indiana, Mathurin versus Buddy Hield. It's looking like Mathurin will start ahead of Buddy Hield, which probably hurts Buddy Hield's ego, reputation there, and it does impact his fantasy value. Thoughts?
Yeah, this was a hard one too, trying to decide which one's going to start. But definitely Mathurin. He's a young guy. He's got that potential. And Buddy Heald, he's actively being shopped, but I think we'll still see quite a bit of fantasy value from him as well. But I would just take him with caution.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, the LA teams. So, LA Clippers, it's been announced that Terrence Mann will be the 5th starter. I don't think that means he will have fantasy relevance in 12-team leagues. But I think, yes, he's worth a hold in deeper leagues, but in 12 teams, I don't think he's worth a pickup right now. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he could even be like a streamer option because you already
Mm.
know that Kawhi and Paul George are going to be out at some point in the season. So anyone on that team could honestly be used as a streamer. Just keep an eye out on them and track the injuries for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was a little bit of excitement with Robert Covington as well. We know that he's been a previous fantasy stud, particularly in category leagues once again. So there was talk that he would come into the rotation. Tyrone Lue admitted that he underplayed him last season. So there was a little bit of excitement there, but it's just looking like he will come off the bench and will have limited minutes. So unfortunately, for those that remembered how good he was at fantasy a few seasons ago, particularly at the 76ers, he won't have that standard league value this season, unfortunately, unless there are multiple injuries or if the superstars do sit. Now, the Lakers, everyone, you either love them or you hate them, but it's looking like their starter will be Taurean Prince for opening night. Jared Vanderbilt is unlikely to play at this stage. That does mean that Rui Hachimura will come off the bench, as I had expected earlier in the season. They've got their superstars with LeBron and AD. D'Lo as well will start. Christian Wood will come off the bench. So a lot of people were high on Christian Wood. Me, not so much, because I know of his limited game and his stats are in category leagues. Now, from a points league perspective, what do you think of Christian Wood?
I had Wood last year when he was on the Mavericks, and I wouldn't really draft him this year just because even last season he was very inconsistent. He had that 1 or 2 games where he would explode, but
Mm.
even with the Lakers too, I feel like he's going to have a little bit of a lesser role. I think he could be a streamer option though, 100%.
Yeah, and particularly on those nights that AD does sit,
Mhm.
he's definitely a viable option to stream in. I don't see him playing a lot of the games alongside of AD,
Yep.
but we'll wait and see. I think there's just too many limitations on his game at this stage. Now, second part of the rotation. So Miami Heat, we spoke about Kyle Lowry or Tyler Hero. I think they'll probably play alongside of each other with probably Hero. Definitely Hero will have more fantasy value. Josh Richardson, don't discount his fantasy value. So he's returning to the Heat after several seasons. I think he can be a sneaky streaming type value. And particularly for 14 teams, I think he's probably worthy of being on your team. Starting power forward, not a great deal of fantasy value in either Kevin Love or Caleb Martin, but I would probably pick Caleb Martin of the two if I had to.
Yeah, I would do the same. I think he has a little bit more potential, and I know he was streamed quite a bit last season as well.
Absolutely. He showed a great game during the playoffs as well. He
Yep.
was one of the key guys for the Heat in that playoff run. Orlando, it's looking like Jalen Suggs will actually start at shooting guard ahead of Gary Harris and Cole Anthony, which limits their spacing alongside of Markelle Fultz, who's not a great three-point shooter. But I think that defense that they both provide is going to give them great impetus alongside of Franz, alongside of Paolo Banchero as well.
Yeah, the Magic actually remind me of the Bulls a little bit with just the overabundance of guards. So it's hard to determine their fantasy value there. But if Suggs is starting, I could see him being an option definitely in deeper leagues or even
Mhm.
as a streamer,
I,
possibly.
I would agree with that. And just keep an eye on Cole Anthony. I just have
Mhm.
a feeling that he could be traded. There's some trade rumors around him. I think he's worthy of. He's a starting caliber type of player. He's not a superstar. He's not setting the world on fire, but I think he's a really good player. Um, so I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up on another team as well. I think he's too good to be a bench player. Now moving to Philly, now the chaos that is James Harden. Well, we have to wait and see where this heads. But at this stage, he won't be suiting up for the 76ers, which bodes really well for DeAnthony Melton and, of course, Tyrese Maxey. But also, does Patrick Beverley get a shot here in terms of fantasy value?
I think potentially. It really depends on what happens with James Harden, but as we've seen before, when he wants out, he gets out.
Mm.
And that's another reason too that he fell in a lot of the leagues that I was drafting for this year. Nobody wanted to take him. But I mean, if he
Yeah,
falls long enough, I mean, he's worth picking up for sure. He'll still give you great scoring, great assists. One of the few players to average over 10, I think, assists
yeah, it
and
was.
scoring as well. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, himself, Halliburton, and Trey Young are the league leaders. I think actually Harden was the league leader. So, as we know, in category leagues, assists are of a premium. So, if he does come back, it's going to be great value for those that were able to draft him at a discounted price as well. So, yeah, watch this space on James Harden. But I'm nervous. I'm nervous that he does sit quite a few games. And we've seen in the past with Philly that they have no hesitation in sitting a player long term until they get the value that they feel is correct. So I am nervous because I am an owner of James Harden in in my keeper league, in my main league. So we'll watch with bated breath on that one. Now, Portland, we've spoken about Portland, but I think the starting small forward role will go to Matisse Thybulle with Shaden Sharp coming off the bench. Sharp should get more minutes than Thybulle, but I think they need that defense to start with alongside of Anthony Simons and Scoot Henderson. I think Thybulle's a nice fit, and then Sharp to come off the bench and provide good fantasy value.
Yep. They're two players definitely to keep an eye on as the season progresses, too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and we spoke about Ayton and Rob Williams. That mix at centre will be interesting to see. Obviously, Ayton is the starting centre, and he'll get the primary minutes. So 30 minutes for him. Where does that leave Rob Williams? Not too sure, but like I said, he still provides fantasy value in limited time. Sacramento, it's looking like Kevin Herter is in the bad book, so he may not start at shooting guard for the Kings this season to start the season. There's talk that it may actually be Chris Duarte. Malik Monk, I think he's locked in as the sixth man, so I don't see him starting, but I think there is a solid role for him. And we saw on a couple of occasions last season that he can just go off at any time. So particularly when Fox is out, I think Monk just steps up and he can be that guy. But I wouldn't be drafting him in standard leagues, neither Huerta, neither Duarte.
Yep, same here.
Nice. We won't go into too much detail with the Spurs. We spoke about Wemby, but I think Jeremy Sohan, he is going to be the starting point guard ahead of Trey Jones, which is interesting. Trey Jones is still worth rostering, in my opinion, but Jeremy Sohan, if he's not on a roster in your league, you make sure that he is right now. But yeah, as I said, Trey Jones is still worth having on your roster for now, but let's see how that pans out. Now, Toronto, your team, I'll get you to talk about your team. You think Gary Trent will actually get a bump in usage?
I think he will. He probably will stay off the bench, but like I said, injuries are a big thing for the Raptors, and they're not afraid to shake things up. So they'll try things out with the lineups. And I know that he will see, increased usage off the bench. He's one of the better guards on the team. And even Grady Dick, too, how his role fits in is going to be a little bit hard to see right now, but I could see them experimenting with him. And he is a great shooter. He'll give you threes. Definitely not someone that I would draft, but someone I would keep an eye on.
Yeah. And we all know what Gary Trent does. It's threes, it's scoring, it's steals as well. So if he can keep that steal rate high, even if he's coming off the bench, then he probably is worthy of a roster spot. But let's watch this space. It does hurt his value if he does come off the bench, but let's wait and see. Utah, it's still not clear who's going to start in the backcourt, but it's looking like one will be Jordan Clarkson. So I think he's sewn that up at a shooting guard. And it's probably going to be Taylor Horton-Tucker at the point guard to start with. Could be Colin Sexton as well. Keontae George, I think, is a really viable option later in the season for the rookie. Chris Dunn is a true point guard, but I just don't think he's high enough on the pecking order.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they divide up the minutes, but there's so many options for this team. And I'm pretty high on Clarkson. I know you didn't put it there, but Lauri Markkanen too. Awesome.
Yeah, Lauri Markkanen, premium as well. So what a rise in fantasy value from last season's draft season. He was an absolute stud. But yeah, he's now got John Collins alongside of him as well. So we'll see how that dynamic works. I don't think Lowry's going to be hurt all that much, but those insane shooting numbers last season, I think that's probably going to regress just a little bit, which does impact his fantasy value in both category and points leagues. Now, finally, Washington, we spoke about Jordan Poole, Tyus Jones as well. Bilal Coulibaly, the 19-year-old Frenchman, he's shown a fair bit on the defensive end. Have you seen much of him, and what do you think in terms of his fantasy value?
Yeah, I haven't watched too much of the Wizards preseason, but I've been looking at the transaction trends, and he's definitely one of the top ads as of late.
Yeah, he did start in the preseason, definitely in the last preseason game as well, alongside of Avdia, but that's while Kyle Kuzma was resting. So we'll see how that starts out. I've got a feeling they'll start Bilal. Just the trajectory at which this team is going at. I don't think they have a need to have Avdia start ahead of Bilal. He was a relatively high draft pick. He was a lottery draft pick as well. So let's see what he's made of. I probably won't have him on my team to begin with, just because he does give you those defensive stats, but offensively, I think he's quite limited as well. But I could change my mind after the first game. So there, the rotations. We've spoken about Wemby. This is such a stud rookie class, but Wemby, Chet Holmgren, it is his rookie season, so he was injured all of last season, but I think those two are going to be vying for Rookie of the Year honors. Scoot Henderson just behind those top two guys. I think he's looked electric as well. So those top three outstanding talents. The Thompson twins, they are built for fantasy. I think Asar is ahead of Amen. I think Amen is probably the more talented player, but I think his runway to fantasy and fantasy value in terms of time isn't quite as clear as it is for Asar. So I'd be preferring Asar over Amen at this stage, but things could change quite rapidly. Bilal Coulibaly, as I mentioned, Brandon Miller, as we talked about earlier, and Derek Lively. So he was a very popular late round flyer, particularly those in categories that needed late round blocks as well. So I think he will be the starting center. He's such a lob threat with Luka, with Kyrie in Dallas as well. So I think for those that have picked him up, you stick with him. He'll have those up and down games, but I think you stick with him for the long term because I think they're going to put some time and investment into this guy.
Yeah, I think honestly, like you said before, the rookie of the year, it's going to be between Wemby and Chet. And those two, they will give you blocks. I've been seeing them getting drafted pretty high in most fantasy leagues. Personally, though, I prefer to go with Scoot just because I felt like he's going to be the primary playmaker on the Blazers. And I think he has a lot of potential. And I also
Yeah.
have less injury concerns about him, too.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that. I can definitely see that from a points league perspective as well.
Yeah.
So that's quite a nice contrast as well, because I think in category leagues, everyone's clear that it'll be Wemby first, Chet second, perhaps even the Thompson twins ahead of Scoot. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's really interesting that you say that about Scoot in points leagues, and I can definitely see that as well. Nice juxtaposition there.
Mhm.
Charlotte, we spoke about their organization. We won't go into too much detail, but that was just another preseason observation. And let's see how that plays out. I just don't think Miles Bridges will play this season, but he is worth a stash, as we said, if you do have that IL slot. Finally, the fantasy changing of the guard. So, particularly with the category leagues, there's just more blocks later in the draft. But there is that run of blocks, and particularly when you think about the rounds that they're drafted in, guys like Mitch Robinson, Dan Gafford, Onyeka Kongwu, these guys are probably being taken around the 7th, 8th round. So if you don't get those guys, you're probably only left with someone like a Derek Lively, as we mentioned there. But there's just so many blocks, which means in category leagues, there's less of a premium of blocks as we've seen in the past, where people used to say that Miles Turner would win you blocks by himself. That's just not the case anymore with so many big guys that do block a lot of shots now. So it is a bit of a changing of the guard, so to speak. Now, my breakout players, and let's comment on these guys, but I want us to start with my boy Jordan Poole. I think he's going to be the main man, as we talked about. I don't need to go into too much detail, but I can see him being one of the probably top 5 scorer in the league, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was the scoring champion this season.
That's a hot take. I don't
Any
know
thoughts
about
on that?
scoring championship, but I think, like you said, he's definitely going to have a breakout season. The pool party will finally be unleashed as a primary
Mm,
option, so that's going to be interesting to see.
absolutely. Yeah, Poole party and Kuzma. That'll be
Mhm.
quite the fun party, actually. All right. Cade Cunningham. I think a lot of analysts have talked about Cade Cunningham. I think he's due. It's third year breakout. We know his pedigree, former number 1 draft pick. He looked awesome for Team USA Select, going up against Team USA, and he had that nice chemistry with Jalen Duren as well. But preseason, he was relatively disappointing, but I guess he's just ramping up as well. He's stronger. I think his field goal percentage will probably go up just because he's been in the gym for another season as well. He'll be able to blow by defenders. He'll be able to finish at the rim a little bit more. So I see that he'll give you those 6 assists, 6 rebounds, 20 plus points, good free throws. It's the field goals that could let him down. But as I said, if he can improve that, I think he's going to be of great value this season.
For sure, he definitely contributes a lot to the primary categories. The other concern, though, is his injury history. I think last year he only played 12 games because he did
Mm.
undergo that season-ending surgery, but still, even in his first year, he had multiple injuries that he suffered. So I know some people are a little bit hesitant to draft him. I know I certainly was.
Right. Yeah. Look, I can see that hesitation as well. I feel like that he's managed to get past that. I feel like it's going to be a massive year, but let's wait and see. It's his team. I think he's going to run the show as well.
For sure.
In a similar vein, Tyrese Maxey, this is really dependent on James Harden and what happens with a potential trade as well. So Tyrese Maxey, just as a floor, I think he's going to be close to top 50 value in category leagues. But if Harden is moved and no one of a similar ilk comes back in a trade, this is Tyrese Maxey's team with obviously Joel Embiid, but he's just going to dominate. We saw in the last preseason game, he got 12 assists. So it's not often that you see that from Tyrese Maxey. His efficiency with his shooting is still going to be there. He doesn't get you a lot of steals, but as the point guard, as the lead point guard with DeAnthony Melton, I think that he will be falling into steals as well. So I could see him being a potential top 30 type player in category leagues.
Yeah, and even last year too, he put up great fantasy stats. He was one of the highest ranked players, and that was with Harden playing. So
Mm,
if he leaves, that could only open up more opportunities for him too.
absolutely. We saw what he did in the playoffs. He was electric. He was really fun to watch. Now, moving tact to a big guy. So Dan Gafford, he was being taken at around pick 100. And again, this is probably more for category leagues where blocks do count for a lot more than they do in points leagues. But I think he could be easily one of the top 10, if not top 5 of the blockers in the league. He'll give you solid field goals, really, really dominant field goals. His main concern is firstly, staying out of foul trouble, but also a potential shutdown risk again later in the season with Washington. But I don't think you worry about that, particularly at the start of the season. So I can definitely see him having a bit of a breakout season this year.
100%. I think everyone on the Wizards is just poised to have a breakout season, right? They're going to see that usage. And Gafford, too, he's someone that I wanted to draft, but I unfortunately did not get. But he will provide lots of blocks, like you said. But even in some points leagues, too, a lot of commissioners will make those worth more. So I know in my league, I made them worth 3 points. And that's one of the highest categories that you can get, too.
Oh, great. He would be a stud then. And his backups are almost non-existent. So I think
Mhm.
if he stays out of foul trouble, he could be playing upwards of 30 minutes. But if he's at that 30-minute mark, he's going to be an absolute fantasy stud. Now, we've spoken about this guy, Anthony Simons for Portland. We probably don't need to go into too much detail, but I think he'll be the number one usage player. He's going to have some humongous scoring nights, great three-point shooter as well, solid from the free throw line. Like when I say solid, elite from the free throw line. So, yeah, huge season in store. We've seen it previously when Dame was injured that he just went off. So he was pretty consistently a top 50, top 60 player whilst Dame was injured a couple seasons back.
Yeah, and that's exactly why he reminds me a bit of Maxi too, because he was ranked pretty high even when Lillard was on the court. So now that there's more opportunities for him as well, more playmaking burdens, scoring definitely. Great young guy with a lot of potential.
Absolutely. All right. All right. We're coming to the end of the show, but just some popular waiver wire pickups heading into week one. So we're a couple of days away from that. We've spoken about Jeremy Sohan. So starting point guard for the Spurs. He's only 44% rostered on Yahoo. So that needs to change quick smart because that's far too low for the role that he's going to have. Taylor Horton Tucker, we spoke about how he is potentially the starting point guard for the Jazz, 25% rostered. That feels about right because I could definitely see him start opening night as the starting point guard, but that could then change very quickly. As we said, there's a plethora of options at the guard position. What do you think?
He's a little bit streaky too. That's the other thing. The inconsistency is definitely a bit of an issue, and why I personally don't have him rostered.
Right. Yes. Now, Derek Lively, we spoke about, particularly in category leagues, great for blocks, late round blocks, field goals. And in the last preseason game, he actually did get quite a few points as well. So he'll get those lobs from, like we said, Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. So I think he's a very solid late round guy with potential and upside to go even higher. Jonathan Kuminga, we spoke about him, 49% rostered. Let's wait and see. I just don't think he will be fantasy relevant come the full rosters of the Warriors as well. So let's just see how that plays out. But very, very popular waiver wire pickup at this stage. Christian Wood, you spoke about. Kayla.
Yep. I'd like to draft sorry, not draft him, stream him off the waivers, but then again that really depends on 80s injuries and stuff like that, which is almost certain to happen.
Yeah, and 58% rostered. I wonder if a lot of that's points leagues or just people just thinking back to how he was in previous seasons at Houston, particularly, and a little bit at Dallas last season as well. Kobe White, we spoke about, starting point guard. I think he should be rostered everywhere in 12 teamers and deeper. Yeah, he's going to be streaky, and at times he may not get the usage that he would like to have alongside a Levine and DeMar as well. But you got to have him on your roster. So that 32% is far too low. Miles Bridges, we spoke about him. He probably does not play this season, but 68% rostered. I can see the appeal, and I'm still actually holding him, and I'm going against my own advice, but I am currently holding him at this stage, just waiting for clarification on where he is and where he's at in terms of his availability moving forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Any
Anything could
thoughts?
happen, right? So he's
Yeah.
definitely, if you have the space, I would say just stash him for a little bit, but it's really a time game. You just got to wait it out.
Exactly, exactly. Amen Thompson, we spoke about him. I think there's a lot of guys ahead of him on that Rockets team. There's a lot of mouths to feed. He's definitely worth rostering, and we'll see how it plays out. Um, we did hear that Tari Eason is injured, and I think he'll be missing the first couple of weeks or maybe even longer of the season. So that does open up a little bit more playing time for Thompson. Um, 43%, I would expect that to rise quite quickly as well. So he's just a bit of an excitement machine. So we'll see how that plays out as well. Kevon Looney, you know what you're going to get with Kevon Looney. He may not start for the Warriors, as we talked about, but I still think if you need those late round rebounds, he's one to keep an eye on. And finally, Brandon Miller. Kayla, you spoke about him quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Miller is I it was surprising because in a lot of my drafts that I did, he wasn't picked. And I think now with the whole
Mm.
issue with Miles Bridges and everything like that, he will have that opportunity to see more usage. And I could see the Hornets starting Miller over Hayward as well. Because he's a little bit older, he's a little bit streaky. He's pretty good. It's just you're taking a chance with him. That's the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's only a matter of time until Hayward gets injured somehow. There's always
Exactly.
something with Hayward. But yeah, Brandon Miller, yeah, we'll see how that plays out. Like number 2 draft pick. So he's got the pedigree there. I think they like him. Michael Jordan loved him before he drafted him as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think there's a great opportunity. It may not be this season, but yeah, good future ahead of him. Now, other notable players, we mentioned Jalen Johnson of Atlanta. It's looking like he will start off the bench, which sort of puts a dampener on things, but I still think he's worthy of a late round flyer. Bilal Coulibaly, defensive specialist, and Kelly Oubre. So if you need those points, and particularly with James Harden not playing at the moment for the 76ers, we know what Oubre brings. So that's a lot of scoring. Not at great efficiency, but he'll still provide you some fantasy value there. All right. So let's get back into it. Now, we're going to close out the show. Let's go here. Now, any final thoughts, Kayla? So, yes, we're heading into regular season in a couple of days. What are you looking out for?
Yep. Honestly, Mikal Bridges is one thing I'm saying look out for because we've already seen a little bit of how he performed with the Nets last year after that trade, and he was just excellent, a stud, right? So I think that's someone to keep an eye out for, 100%.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. Yeah, we sort of went through the rotations. I'd love to see how it all plays out and if we can get some clarity on some of those younger guys as well, because I'll be hot on that waiver wire. And if you follow us on Twitter and just give us a shout out, Kayla, what's your Twitter handle?
Yep. My handle is Kayla_Fonte.
Yeah, perfect. So you'll find me at NBA Fantasy Bible as well. Make sure you follow us. We'll be on the dial. We'll be providing you with all the information as well to hopefully help you win your league this season. Stay with us. We're going to have a lot of content coming this season. Thank you so much, Kayla. Any
Yeah,
final
thanks.
thoughts?
Final thoughts. Well, speaking of Bridges, that just reminds me of the Nets. Keep an eye out for Ben Simmons too. He's finally
Oh
returning.
my
Will he
God,
stay
yeah.
healthy? I don't know.
Aussie Ben, yeah. Look, I don't have the Australian bias, but it's great to see him healthy
Mhm.
as well. So I have felt sorry for him. Some of his attitude issues are being brought upon. Some of this is being brought upon himself. But yeah, he's healthy and he's looking electric. So yeah, that's a great one. I love to see that one. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, everyone. Hit us up, and we'll see you shortly. Thanks, guys.